Welcome to Lesson 7 in our Bible study on the book of Job. It's been such an interesting study, and it still is, and it's difficult in some cases. Some things we just have to accept as being the way they are, the way they're recorded. And as we move toward the end, I know that we'll get a more complete view of the lesson. We're looking at Job's friends and their speeches that they gave to him. And the first one is Zophar, the Hamanite. And Zophar contends that Job would realize that he's not suffering because of his goodness, but he's suffering because he really deserved to suffer. I think in our world today, that's common, that we would think that people who are suffering are probably getting what they deserve, or maybe what they bought. And compassion is in some places at some time, but it's not a constant presence for sure. Another very important thing, or reaction of Zophar to Job, was that he's an empty-handed man. He was a wealthy man, and now he's empty-handed. And he has to go about his daily living in the suffering that is present. In chapter 11 of Job, let's look at verses 13 through 20, which will give us a lot of insight into the circumstances of this lesson today. 13 through 20. If thou prepare thine heart and stretch out thine hands toward him, if iniquity be in thine hand, put it far away, and let not wickedness dwell in thy tabernacles. For then shalt thou lift up thy face without spot, yea, thou shalt be steadfast, and thou shalt not fear, because thou hast forgot thy misery, and remember it as the waters that passed away. And thine age shall be clearer than the noonday. Thou shalt shine forth, and thou shalt be as the morning. And thou shalt be secure, because there is hope. Yea, thou shalt dig about thee, and thou shalt take the rest in safety. Also thou shalt lie down, and none shall make thee afraid. Yea, many shall make suit unto thee. But the eyes of the wicked shall fail, and they shall not escape, and their hope shall be as giving up of the ghost. What a friend to tell Job, you need to reach out to God, and you need to confess your sins, and you need to ask him to bless you. And all this will be kind of a ancient memory in your mind. It'll just pass by as the waters go under a bridge, and you won't ever see them again. Your memory will be of what was, and not what you're enduring now. And that was basically the advice of Zophar. It's all Job's fault. It's his lack of faith and turning to God to ask God's forgiveness. And this brings about a dilemma. What's he guilty of? His punishment, his suffering, his agony had nothing to do with sin. Now, he wasn't a perfect man, I'm sure. But the insight, the purpose of God having him go through all of these things was because of his faith. But it was to demonstrate to Satan that Job was a faithful servant of God. And so sometimes the temptations that come to us are just that. They're temptations. Well, maybe it'd be easy for me just to make up something that I did and ask for forgiveness of it. But would that have been truly being faithful to God? No, it wouldn't. So Job suffers. He's suffering for the cause of God. And he doesn't want to deny that. So no matter what his friend Zophar was telling him, It just didn't ring true to Job because he knew that he was not being punished because of his sin, nor are his children being punished because of their sin. Zophar told Job to put away his sin and that God would give him the security that he thought he had, the rest and the comfort that he desired. Otherwise, if Job doesn't stop sinning, there is no escape for him. I must tell you, Job's not the only one that does that. And I think I'm guilty at times, and I know I have a friend that we talk to pretty regularly, and he can't let go of the guilt of sin that he's got. And so every time there's a problem, it's almost because I just got to stop this sinning. I got a couple things I got to stop. Well, suffering's not all because of our sin. And I think this is a good point to remind us of. Surely, when God created the heavens and the earth and he put Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, it was a perfect world. Did they get sick? No. They weren't even going to die. Did they have suffering? No. Did they have pain? No. What happened that changed things? They yielded to the temptation of Satan. Now, that's for the whole bunch. That's for the race. So yeah, sin causes sickness. Sickness is because of sin. Pain is because of sin. All of the things that are bad are causes of sin. But we can't get down to an individual level and say it's because of your sin. It's the nature that sin is in the world today, and all of the bad of the world is because of sin. But we cannot go around and say this is because of your sin, it's because of this particular sin. It's the general state of our being in this day and time because of the presence of sin in the world today. Job makes a speech about God's sovereignty. You know, God is sovereign, and a good friend of mine has gone on to be with the Lord, Brother Claude Rickards, in Sunday school class one Sunday. We were having a big debate about this or that or the other, or could it be or could it not be? And Brother Claude listened, and then everything got quiet, and Brother Claude says, well, the way I see it, God is God. He can do anything he wants to. And that's the point that we need to keep in mind. He's sovereign. He can do what he wants to do. He's not going to violate his own will, but he can do what he wants to do. He's God. He is an all-wise God. So who was Job to be telling God what to do when God was all-wise? He was all-powerful. What did Job have to do with saying, God, this needs to be done, you need to do it? Well, because Job wasn't sovereign, but God is. He charged that his friends have not stated anything new. He expressed that they had stayed quiet, they would have been thought to be wise. You know what, that reminds me of a story I used to tell from time to time in my history classes. Supposedly a true story. But, and it's attributed to President Lincoln. President Lincoln was questioned about one of his appointees, and it probably was a political appointee, but the accusations were that he was not qualified to hold the office that he was appointed to. Well, a little later on, President Lincoln defended his choice, and later on, he had talked with the man and said, now, we both know your limitations, so you need to be quiet as possible. Well, before long, the man had started talking, and he got into all kind of trouble and led the administration into trouble. And Lincoln supposedly said, whatever his name was, it would have been better to have kept your mouth closed and been thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. And I think that's kind of what Job was telling his friend here so far. Hey, if you had never said anything, people might have thought you were wise. But with what you've said, it's evident that you're not. So Job was a real man, and he could tell it like it was. Let's read chapter 12, verses 1 through 4, and it may address that. And Job answered and said, he's answering to Zophar, no doubt, but ye are the people, and wisdom shall die with you. But I have understanding as well as you. I am not inferior to you, yea, who knoweth not such things as these? I am as one mocked in his neighbor, who called upon God and answereth him. The just upright is laughed to scorn. When we get off into our own wisdom and leave God's wisdom, people are going to laugh at us, maybe not to our face and maybe to our face. Job states that his friends are conceited. You think you are wiser than I am. You think you know so much that nobody else knows, that people may have thought you were wise, but now they think you're conceited because you think you're superior in intelligence to the rest of us. He goes on, anybody knows that God is wise and he's all powerful. Not just you. You three friends, y'all don't have a lock on the truth. Far from it. Job makes a speech about the Lord's sovereignty. He is an all-wise God. He is all-powerful. He is all-present, omnipresent. He charged that his friends have not stated anything new. He expressed that had they remained quiet, their advice would have been better. And so that was Job's response to his friend Zophar. Job turned to God and addresses him. Now, up to now, he's been talking to his friend, and Zophar in particular. But now Job turns to God. He begs for relief. Job demands some explanation. Tell me, Lord, why all of this is going on. You ever been to a point you wanted to do that? You probably done it, and I have done it. And so when he was asking for an explanation, that's still in God's hands because of his sovereignty. He acknowledged that he was wasting away and was not worthy of even being noticed. With this communication with God, Job demonstrated that he was a more objective and honest observer than were his friends. His friends were giving him all kind of advice, but Job had a better handle on it than they did. As for the worldly, the little faith of his friends was easily believed. The people in the world that listened to their explanation, had they been listening, would have found it easy to believe, and it might have been more difficult to believe what Job was saying. But his fault was a challenge to others to understand. You know, sometimes the truth is harder to understand than a lie. And I think that's kind of where we are here. And I think in many cases today, we believe a lie that sounds good rather than believe the truth that might not sound so good. He said there's more hope of a tree that has been cut down than there is for him. That was the way Job saw it. I don't have any hope anymore. Look, God's turned against me. Look what all's going on. And yet I believe and trust in God because he's sovereign. But it's like I'm a tree that's been cut down. I'm not going to be restored. And that's a little wrinkle in the faith that he has. In chapter 14, let's read verses 1 through 6. Man that is born of woman is of a few days and full of trouble. You heard that before? That came from Job. man that is born of a woman. In other words, we have a physical birth here in this earth. Life is a vapor, is of a few days, and it's full of trouble. This world is filled with trouble. He cometh forth like a flower and is cut down. He fleeth also as a shadow and continueth not. We're here, we're gone. And doth thou not open thine eyes upon such an one, and bringeth me into the judgment with thee? I'm ready to go and be with you, Lord. Tired of this suffering. Who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean one? Not one, but God. So there is hope, even when we don't feel hope. The word is true. Job knew that he was not among the wicked as far as being one of them, and yet he knew he was subject to the advice of the world. He chose to remain faithful to the sovereignty of God, whatever that meant. He had some ideas what he wanted it to mean. He wanted to mean that this life was over for him and he was with Jesus or with God. And yet God had a purpose for what was happening and continued to happen with Job. So we'll move on to lesson 8 soon. And I hope that you're studying. I hope you're listening to these chapters being read, or that you're reading them yourself, or maybe both. And invite somebody else to join us in this study of Job. All of the lessons are on a playlist on Facebook and will soon be on YouTube. So thank you so much for your participation, and may God bless you.